Massachusetts voters will soon have a chance to legalize marijuana for recreational use. A yes vote on question 4 would legalize the drug for adults and have it taxed and regulated much like alcohol. Tonight we hear from 2 supporters of the measure from Regulate Massachusetts, the campaign manager Will Luzier and the outreach director Kim Napoli. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with Kim Napoli. A big concern for city councilors backing this measure is social justice. They're worried about the racial disparities in arrests for possession, with the brunt of that borne by people of color. How would this referendum change that?
What we're currently seeing under the current system is that people who are of color are 3 to 4 times as likely to be arrested, experience legal ramifications of possession or smoking marijuana. At this point, the legal system in Massachusetts and the nation is clogged with a serious backlog of cases resulting from those arrests. I think the most significant way that we'll see a change is that they won't be subject to the disparate treatment of an impact of the war on drugs that they've experienced thus far.
Do you feel this is still an issue because, recent years marijuana has been at least decriminalized for a lot of those kinds of cases? Is this still a problem even with decriminalization?
Actually, I think the decriminalization has highlighted what a significant problem it is. Arrests have dropped across the board since decriminalization. However, it's still now three to four times, as I said, 3 to 4 times as likely to be people of color who are getting arrested for it than otherwise, which has the impact is greater than just being in court. It extends to housing, it extends to the ability to get federal student loans. So it really is a significant issue that needs to be corrected, and we're hoping that this measure will go a long way in addressing that.
Well, this referendum comes at a time of escalating worries about the opioid crisis, and there are people who just have a hard time with this. They say this is a gateway drug. It's going to lead to more serious things. What do we know about this?
Well, there are several studies that have shown that it's not a gateway drug, number one. Number two, there are some studies and a lot of anecdotal evidence that says that it's really an exit drug from opiate addiction. There's a recent study that says that folks who are allowed to use marijuana while they're in treatment for opiates are retained in treatment longer. And we know that if you're retained in treatment longer, you have a much less likelihood of recurring problems. There's also a study that says that folks who are allowed to use marijuana during the withdrawal period have much less of a problem with withdrawal. And there are lots of studies that talk about the availability of marijuana for the treatment of pain. The problem with opioids is the overprescription of pain medications. And if folks are allowed to use marijuana for pain, they won't be as dependent on opioids. And so bottom line is, we think it's an exit drug. The only way that it's really a gateway drug is you're driving people to a market where they have to buy marijuana from criminals who have other things to sell them besides marijuana, including opiates.
We're talking with Will Luzier and Kim Napoli from Regulate Mass. Kim, talk about there was a person at the press conference recently supporting this who was a disabled veteran, and he had a really sad story.
His story was very compelling. Stephen Mandley, he was a veteran, injured, and as a result of his injuries, was able to access the medication that his physicians prescribed him with, which, opiates and of a severe nature. I think he said there was 4 total types of opiates that are being prescribed to millions of veterans, which is, just a huge. This is by the VA. Yes, this is just a stagger. I mean, that there are only 4 drugs being prescribed to millions of people, and they're becoming addicted at just astonishing rates, and unable to seek access to other medicine that can actually affect their pain in a positive way. He eventually found medical marijuana and found it to be very helpful for him. Unfortunately, because of the structure of the system presently, it cost him $800 a week, which ended up forcing him to go back to fentanyl, something that he had been on and struggled with before. He talked about how his life, he thought about ending his life, which is just such a significant thing to even he's a father, he's a husband, and to have this as an effect, being driven to something so desperate because of medicine, because of pain, and not being able to have easy access or affordable access to something that has been so life-changing for him. It's one of the huge reasons why what he said was so compelling and why we feel so propelled to get this across the ballot, or get this across the plate.
One of the things that's important to remember, Chris, is that we think that the regulated system, the adult use system, will drive prices down and will allow folks who really need this as medicine and can't get it for whatever reason because they don't have the cards or because
it'd be cheaper than going to a dispensary. Too. Probably.
Well, it'll certainly drive the cost down across the board, and there won't be any tax. It still won't be any tax at dispensaries. The medical marijuana is not taxed. So, but it'll drive the market down across the board. And one of the things that we hear is that there are 800,000 to 1 million people who have indicated in studies that they've used marijuana in the last year, and they're being driven to a criminal market where they're being sold a product that's not safe, that's not tested, and we just believe that it's time to take that commerce out of the shadows, bring it out into the light, and make sure that it's regulated and taxed, and we can use the tax revenues for important purposes like drug treatment, like education. The governor was forced recently to cut several $1 million from the budget because there wasn't projected to be enough money. This would provide over $100 million in revenue once it's fully rolled out.
Kim, talk about the ability to regulate what's being sold, because we've heard stories over the years, people buying something, it was strange, we don't know what was in it, how potent it was. Can you really pinpoint the potency and know what you're selling here?
Certainly, and to an extent, yes. With the rollout of the medical marijuana system in Massachusetts, we've seen what some might even refer to as over-regulation with regards to how much control there is and how much attention to detail there is that goes into the quality of the plants and the medicine that's produced. At this point, we clearly say that what we're doing in terms of prohibition isn't working. There is no regulation aside from you get caught, you go to jail. With regulating and taxing it, it is forced to go to labs. There's stringent, heavy metals and lead testing, all those things that need to be done to ensure that what you're getting is something that's qualified. A friend of mine who works at the dispensary often says, you wouldn't, by the dispensary standards, by the DPA standards for the regulation of medical marijuana, you wouldn't be able to purchase the juice on your shelf in the supermarket because of how much regulation goes into the plants and the medicine at the dispensaries.
Well, what about the trickle down to underage users? Because we have that with alcohol. Couldn't it happen here? And what do we know from Colorado?
Well,
where they've legalized?
What's happened in Colorado is since legalization, there hasn't been any increase in youth use. And we're just as interested in making sure that youth don't access marijuana as our opponents. That's why we mandate that the Cannabis Control Commission has to regulate and not allow sales to anyone under the age of 21, not allow advertising that's attractive to anyone under the age of 21, have child-proof packaging, and one of the things that they did in Colorado was they did a study of 800 high school seniors who said that they didn't want to hear the just say no message anymore because they didn't believe it. They want to hear the truth about the drug and what their choices are and be treated as adults. And that's what we will be able to do if we stop conflating abuse with use of marijuana.
Kim, what about where these products are going to be sold? Because people are nervous enough already about dispensaries for medical marijuana. We're nervous about alcohol and cigarettes too. So what about the ability to do that, to regulate that way?
The ability to regulate that, can I actually defer to you on this question?
Sure. So I'm sorry, Chris.
People don't want a whole cluster of places selling marijuana in their own neighborhood, probably. So
localities will be able to zone. They'll be able to make sure that a facility is that the operating hours are appropriate, that the mode of operation is appropriate, and we'll be able to zone those facilities where they're located appropriately. And so there's a lot of local control that will be able to, the localities will be able to say where these facilities are located.
Great. Thank you both very much, Will Luzier and Kim Napoli
Thanks
from
so much, Chris.
Regulate, Massachusetts. In a moment, a new app for summer relief.